this term Zeitgeist, we usually use that term spirit to mean um, like an there's different ways to think about it, but sometimes we think of spirit as like a force, or we think of the word spirit as meaning like the flavor, like, you know, he's got a great spirit or a happy spirit or something. It's almost like we think of it as like the flavor of the moment, but to use it literally like a spirit, not as an animating force, but actually as like a personality, like a spirit, like a ghost. You know, it's an entity.
Yeah, like how they refer to it into classical Hellenic philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and in the early Christianity up
Mm-hmm.
until a good long while, is spirit was not just an animating force, but it was something else. That's why a demon was referred to as a spirit, or when a demon took effect over someone, the person was filled with that demon's spirit.
Or the Holy Spirit, right? It's very confusing because I think when you look at like depictions of the Trinity, you have the Father and the Son. They're clearly people, like they have personage, but then the Holy Spirit is like a dove, or the Holy Spirit is like a ray of light, and so it depicts it as this animating force or something like that, and that's how it's usually been understood. But if you fully understand the Trinity as being three people, it's like, no, the Holy Spirit is not a spirit in terms of being a force. It's actually a person. And so, that was really interesting. The Zeitgeist, as it's not just like an idea, or it's not just like a flavor of the month, but the Zeitgeist is actually the ghost of the time, or the person of the time, that goes into people and starts to mobilize them, starts to organize them, starts to coordinate them. And I mean, it's a very interesting idea, and it's been very thoroughly rejected by, rationalistic, atheistic, sort of this libertarian idea of, I'm a person and I look out into the world empirically and I gather my sense data and then I come up with a theory of the world. It's like nobody actually does that. Nobody because these people have kind of forgotten that they were ever children. They've forgotten that they ever were in a state of helplessness. So when you're in a state of helplessness, you don't make up theories about the world. Theories about the world are put into you, and that colors your perception. And so, I guess the quote from Jung, you're saying that, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. Ideas sort of possess people, and they take hold of people, and they define people, rather than people sort of like stepping out of this void and saying, I'm going to like go to the tree of ideas and I'm going to pick the idea off the tree, and I'm going to I'm going to consider this idea and I'll consider that. I mean, I'm kind of reminded of the Garden of Eden, where, you have this.
It has a very Nietzschean Uberman kind of idea to it, kind of feel to the idea, doesn't it? Like, I'm this great Uberman and I'm going to create my values and ideas all on my own. That's not true.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it defining the individual as alone and by himself and capable of complete sovereignty over ideas. You're looking in the Garden of Eden, and it's like you have all this fruit to choose from. You have all these things you have, and that's kind of, in some ways, the story of Genesis is a story about like a Nietzschean Adam who can choose the names of the animals and he can choose whatever he like. But there still is, there's a flaw in that story, right? There's a flaw in the sense that Adam, as much as we would like to be Adam, we would like to be rational, and we would like to be, completely agentic, and having the ability to choose from one thing to another and not be enslaved by any one given thing and have this total, complete freedom. That's what the Garden of Eden is like. But there's an issue, because there's one fruit that will introduce a form of slavery. It's this knowledge of good and evil. And what does that mean? The knowledge of good and evil, it's to sort of understand metaphysics and morality to understand that, like, I actually don't have complete freedom. This is sort of an illusion. Like, I can't just choose whatever I want. And in fact, it sort of possesses Adam and Eve to the point where it changes their fundamental nature. Like, they're no longer these sinless beings living in this libertarian paradise of ultimate freedom and choice. Now they're actually enslaved to the possession of an idea. Like, the idea of good and evil has possessed them, and it has infected them, and it now controls them, and they cannot liberate themselves from it. And they have to. I think that basically is what civilization and language more broadly. The idea comes in, it possesses you, and it makes you aware of the fact that your choices are limited. Whereas if you're just kind of going about in this sort of pre-conscious, animalistic, pre-linguistic space, then you are simply perceiving things. You are simply, walking around. You're sort of ignorant of this process by which ideas enframe you and entrap you. And once you realize that, you're like, wow, my whole world is defined from outside by these ideas that were given to me. I don't have complete agency over them. I don't have the ability. You can try to retreat into the woods or into a fantasy world, and a lot of people do that, right? They view the internet in that way. They view the internet, I can go on the internet, I can choose a community, I'll hang out with the people I like to hang out with, I'll promote the memes that I like, I'll just segregate myself over here with my friends, people who think like me. And therefore, that's the part of my life where I have agency. That's the part of my life where I can choose to do what I want to do. And I'll just kind of resent the fact that the outer world is a world of rules and a world of authoritarianism and a world of being forced to do things that I don't want to do. But that is not just the state of modern man or something. That's the state of any kind of civilized society. You have this realm of abstraction because you can't, at some level, humans can't coordinate in large groups without some form of abstraction, and abstraction inherently is going to be alienating. So religion is just the process of trying to normalize, familiarize, and sacralize this process of alienation to the point where it can feel normal. It can feel, when we think about ritual is repetitive. Ritual is mundane. Ritual is boring. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone to, a traditional Catholic mass or a mass that's a Christian mass that's in a different language, but you're just standing there for about 2 hours, and they're just repeating these lines that have been repeated a million times before, and you really don't know what's going on. You're not really getting a lot of substance or education out of it. You're just sort of sitting there, and you're like, well, this is not novel, this is not new, this is not, some kind of creative, stimulating new idea. But that's the point. The point is meant to introduce a sense of, normalization. Everything is okay. It's really about reducing the fear and the anxiety that come from realizing that, society is governed by abstractions. It's not governed by intimate social relations, which is like it's a disturbing and an oppressive thought that, like, everything it has this kind of bureaucratic character, and you can't ever push through. A lot of people are trying to solve that. The libertarians are trying to get rid of government because they see the government as the source of abstraction. And then you've got the socialists who are trying to get rid of capitalism as the source of abstraction. And you've got the religionists who are trying to get rid of atheism because they believe that the science is the source of abstraction. And then you've got the scientists who are trying to get rid of religion because they believe that's where the illusion of abstraction comes from. So everybody's trying to get rid of the abstraction and pointing fingers to the other way. And it's like, no, actually, you all have your own systems of abstraction. As long as you're speaking words, you're dealing with a system of abstraction. You're not going to be able to get rid of that, and the consequences of that, you can only try to figure out, okay, we're going to have this abstraction, and it's going to feel alienating. It's going to be it's going to create these conflicting wills and conflicting natures. It's not just one zeitgeist, but you're going to have many different Geister, I forget what the plural is. But you're going to have all of these spirits, and you're going to have to figure out a way to reconcile them, to, create a pantheon, and to have all of them get along as best as they can. But you're never going to have this resolution where you've got perfect sovereignty, perfect agency, and a perfect system that is, completely without whatever you want to call it, injustice or alienation or whatever. There's always going to be this kind of imbalance that you can deal with through accepting it, or you can try to, in this utopian revolution, you can try to overthrow it and create something new. And maybe you think that's going to be better, and maybe it's going to solve certain problems and open up new problems. But, that tension is always going to be there. And people think of a lot of this stuff as very new, and that this is just a product of, if only we could go back to the 1950s, we would be all right. But, unfortunately,
that's a very hard mindset to deal with when someone's really